Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Casimir Kikelka, and I'd like to welcome you to an afternoon with Macmillan. I'd like to take this time quickly to thank my colleagues at Mandatory Education who are helping make this afternoon possible. And now I'd like to also bring in my colleague, Jonathan Hadley, who will be discussing how we can inspire change makers in our teenage classrooms. Just a quick reminder to everyone, we'll be sort of monitoring the questions as you type them into YouTube. And Jonathan will try to handle those as he's giving his talk, but should anything escape us or we don't have time to deal with it, well, we'll still have a few minutes towards the end, so I'll come back in with 5 to go, and then we can try to handle those questions. So without further ado, I'll pass the mic to Jonathan, and let's see what you have to say. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
That's great. Thank you, Casimir, for the introduction, and thank you to Mondadori as well. I'm delighted to be here with you. My name's Jonathan Hadley. I'm an English language teaching consultant for Macmillan Education, and I'm based here in the UK. I'm delighted to be with English colleagues in Italy. So the presentation that I'm going to give today, I'm just going to bring up my slides. The topic, as Casimir said, we're looking at change makers, and we'll discuss what that means and how to inspire and upskill our students who are perhaps going to be the next generation of change makers. So the aims of today's webinar, it's just going to run for an hour. We're going to look at global citizenship, and in particular, look at some of the topics or themes that perhaps we could use in our English language classrooms. We'll have a little exploration of what global citizenship is. I'm the co-author of the Global Citizenship Education framework for Macmillan Education, so we'll have a little look at that as well. And we'll explore what it is that a change maker is and how we can perhaps use that as a topic in the classroom. The framework that I designed with my colleague Matt Hayes, it looks at knowledge, attitudes, action, and skills, and it helps us to plan and prepare our lessons or activities with a focus on global citizenship. I'm a teacher myself, and the thing that I really am interested in is how to integrate global citizenship into the regular English curriculum so that we can still deliver the syllabus. And that's what we'll explore a little bit today too. And then I know some people have perhaps concerns about global citizenship education. So we'll spend perhaps the last 5-10 minutes looking at the challenges or perhaps some of the common fears, and then come up with some practical solutions. There won't be much theory today because, as I said, as a teacher, the main focus that I'm interested in is what works in the classroom. So let's begin by just checking that we're all familiar with this term, a global citizen. I've put the start of a sentence, a global citizen ... in the chat box. Could you complete that sentence? What do you understand by the term a global citizen? What does a global citizen do? What does he do, or what does she do? There may be a problem with the chat. We'll just see if we get any comments coming through. But I'll just give a few seconds just to see if the chat is working. If not, just to yourself, what do you understand by the term a global citizen? And then I'll come with my response. So we'll just see if anybody is able to type, if we're able to use the technology for that.
Hi, Jonathan. It does look like there's a problem with the chat, I'm afraid. So.
Okay, all right. So thank you for that. So just to yourself, give you 30 seconds. What do you understand by the term a global citizen or global citizenship? Okay, so here are some of my suggestions. This is what I think a global citizen does. You can see on the screen, I'm not going to read them out to you. The different colors is just to help you to be able to read them. The red doesn't mean that one is more important than the other, but it gives you a whole range of what I consider to be the things that a global citizen perhaps should do. Key words and phrases that I'd pick out. The importance of evaluating and questioning the world, the community, the school, the environment around them. And that could be understanding and evaluating global institutions, perhaps like the United Nations or global charities. Questioning the concept of global interdependence, so how the world is linked together. That could be in terms of finance or in terms of shopping, products produced in one country, imported and exported to another country. Also, you'll notice gains exposure to global cultures, so the importance of being aware of other communities outside ourselves. And here I've put the reason to do this is to be more tolerant, to try and understand other cultures, as well as understand our own culture and be able to step into the shoes of other people. And have a healthy respect for diversity, to acknowledge that there is difference in the world. People might have different opinions to myself. They might have different festivals, different foods, different cultures. That's interesting. That's something to be aware of. Not to dismiss or say, oh, yuck, that food is terrible, but to keep an open mind and to show curiosity in other cultures, countries, and people. We can also, as a global citizen, perhaps analyze power relations. What are the power relations, both within perhaps the classroom, the school, within a family, within a community? What is my position? What is my identity? We can try and uncover stereotypes and also discover our own bias. What do we think about certain situations, certain people, certain countries? What do we think about gender concepts? And again, the idea here is to show curiosity, to show interest, to be open-minded, to value difference and diversity, and therefore to encourage this concept of being tolerant, understanding, and open. And lastly, I put at the bottom, I think the most important thing as a global citizen is that we should exercise personal responsibility. The term citizen implies, well, usually it implies you are a citizen of a country or a state, but we can also be a citizen of the world. And with that citizenship, we do have rights, but equally we have responsibilities. The actions that we take, the decisions that we make can have consequences. So ultimately, we want to make sure that our actions, our consequences have a positive effect, a positive influence on those in our family, school, community, country, indeed on the world on a larger scale. So those are the kind of thoughts that I had in terms of what a global citizen should do. And of course, taking these quite high-level concepts, we can use them as topics or themes for us to explore in global citizenship education. So breaking down some themes. The examples I gave you are high level, but as teachers, we need to be able to make this more practical, more realistic, more appropriate within our classroom. A lot of this will depend on the age group of our students, their cognitive abilities. It will also depend on the teaching context in which we operate. But I've selected on the left of your screen 5 of the high-level themes. So A, B, C, D, and E. And I've tried to break these down and make them more realistic and practical in terms of what focus we could actually use in our English language classroom. So if you look at the red bubbles on the right-hand side, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Can you please try and match the red bubble to A, B, C, D, or E? If the chat box is not working, just give you some moments to try and work it out for yourselves. So please match A, B, C, D, E, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so if we look at the first possible classroom topic, number 1 is carry out a survey to see what boys and girls like. For example, is it true that only boys like football? So a survey, this is something we do in the English language classroom, asking the questions, do you like? Yes, I do. No, I don't. So we can bring in those present simple questions with short answers, using the language and the grammar structures that are very common to perhaps an A1 or A2 level class. And finding out then what boys and girls like. Boys like football. This would therefore be looking at the question of a stereotype. Is it true that all the boys in the classroom like football and no girls like it? So that word stereotype, depending on the level and age group of my students, I might not introduce it into the classroom. But by carrying out a survey with likes and dislikes, I can be kind of introducing the topic of stereotypes into the classroom by just checking with students, is it true that all boys like this, or most boys, or some boys? And again, you can introduce those key vocabulary phrases of all, most, some. The second one, learn about where people are from and note similarities and differences. Learn about similarities and differences between own country and other countries. So that would be A, exposure to global cultures. And by culture here, I mean culture in a broad sense, which also includes identity. Again, depending on the level of the students, we could be looking at the weather in other countries, the food, the clothing, what people do in their free time, perhaps marriage customs, birth customs, those types of things, to show students that there may be similarities between their own country and other countries, but interestingly, there could be differences. And as I said, raise awareness, raise curiosity about it. And you'll notice that as an English teacher, those are fairly common topics, aren't they? Weather, food, clothing, festivals, that type of thing. So an important point here about global citizenship, we're not necessarily adding extra to the English curriculum. We're perhaps sprinkling onto regular English topics a sort of global citizenship flavor to it. And we could perhaps explore some of the common topics that we use in English from a slightly different perspective by adding 1 or 2 extra questions. Number 3, learn the concepts of fair and unfair, and learn some basic facts about the United Nations and the United Nations rights of the child. So this would be D, learning about global institutions. The United Nations might seem quite a challenging big topic to cover with our younger students, but I think even at primary level, you could introduce them to a simplified version of the rights of the child, that every child has food and clean water as a right. And again, these are relatively simple words, food and water, but we're just getting them to think in a slightly different way about perhaps rights and responsibilities. And we can introduce the concept of human rights, perhaps, by looking at the word fair and then the negative unfair. Perhaps by focusing more on their family situation or their home situation or the classroom. What is fair and what is unfair, by giving them some examples. Number 4, learn about rules in the classroom. So the key word here, rules. This will therefore be matching C, analyzing power relations. So power relations, high-level term, probably too difficult for our students at primary or even lower secondary. But by focusing on something that they are more familiar with or comfortable with, like rules in the classroom, we are exposing them to the idea that there are power relations between the teacher and the student, and perhaps between students themselves. And as I mentioned in the red box, they can learn about the responsibilities of being a student and also the responsibilities of the teacher. And we might end up drawing up a classroom charter or rules, what the teacher will do and what the student will do. So setting out expectations. And therefore, we're laying the foundations, the basic groundwork of something that could be explored with older students at a higher level, which would be power relationships. And we might take it out of the classroom and then look more at perhaps the world of business. What are the power relationships between a customer and a producer, or between a government and its citizens? Again, we are not imposing anything on the curriculum. Global citizenship is all about openness. So what I'd be saying here is these are just suggestions that you might be interested in doing in your classroom if it's appropriate, if it's of interest to you and your students, but it's not something that you have to do. These are purely suggestions which you might find useful. And of course, adapt and change them to your own teaching context. So the last one, number 5, learn where some foods come from. This would match B, encountering the concept of global interdependence. And you might want here to show students the kind of foods that they have in their local supermarket. Where do these foods come from? Do they have them in their house? Perhaps some homework. They could open the kitchen cupboards and see if every product comes from Italy. If it doesn't, where does it come from? And what do we think about that? Is it good to import foods? It might be good for farmers in developing countries that they can sell their products to Italy. But what about the carbon footprint? What about the environmental consequences? So taking a high-level concept, global interdependence, and just making it something more familiar to them. Or the example on the screen, look at the school bag. Is it made in Italy? If it's not, where is it made? Perhaps in Asia. What do we think of that? How did that process occur? What type of, the cost of it, the money, where do they think that money went to? The producer, the factory, a middleman? And you get to then explore all kinds of interesting topics revolving around global citizenship, while still using the vocabulary that's probably going to be taught at their level. So hopefully this shows that even though the concepts and topics might seem intimidating or challenging or difficult, it is relatively simple to break them down into an activity or a theme that is closer to the themes that we naturally have in our English language course books. So I mentioned at the beginning that Macmillan Education has a framework for global citizenship. And on the screen, 3 key words that I want to share with you. When we are planning our global citizenship lessons, it's useful to think about what do we want our students to know about? So knowledge, first of all. But knowledge isn't enough, just having the input. We need to do something with that input. Students need to be able to express their opinion, their own attitude, and importantly, they need to listen to the attitudes of others. So that's the second part, attitudes. And it's good for them to know and to be able to express themselves. But if we want them to be an active global citizen, then we need to give them the opportunity, if they're interested or motivated, to take action. Now, that action could be real action. So they want to write, for example, to an MP or to a charity or a global organization in English. Or they might want to take action in their community or their school to clean up pollution, pick up litter, reduce plastic, that kind of action. They might want to set up perhaps a little march in their town, giving their opinion about climate change. There's a wide variety of different actions that they could take. But equally, it doesn't have to be real direct action. It can be modeled action in the classroom. So it's just something that happens within the classroom. That might be practicing writing an email or practice writing a letter in English. It may go no further than just writing that letter. And then students could use that in their own time if they want to really send the letter, or they want to translate it into Italian if it's going to an Italian organization. But we're just giving them the opportunity, the skills, the knowledge within the classroom to take a modeled form of action. So perhaps as a teacher, you might be concerned about doing something for real outside the classroom. That doesn't mean you can do perhaps no action. Just try doing things in the classroom, writing posters, as I say, practice the skill of letter and email writing, or whatever would be useful for them to use perhaps later on in their educational career or later on in life. So raising their awareness and giving them the skills. And you'll notice on the framework, I've got 4 skills that are integrated within knowledge, attitudes, and action. For our students to be able to do those areas, they need certain skills. And I've labeled them as, at the top left, you can see collaborative skills. For students to be effective, they need to be able to cooperate and work with others to reach their goal. So encouraging group work, pair work, in projects working together. On the top right, you'll notice creative skills. And I'm not thinking here just in terms of art, music, or dance, although those can be usefully employed as well. But as I've written, the ability to think and express oneself in an original way. So I'm thinking here of creativity as in innovation. On the bottom right, you've got questioning skills. So our students need to have the skills to be able to critically think, to question the world around themselves, and also to question themselves. Particularly important when it comes to attitude. The attitude, the concepts that they want to express. Are they appropriate? Are they right? Are they similar to others? So self-evaluation, self-analysis is an important skill that we should try and develop in the classrooms. And again, it's something that we often do in a regular English language classroom, self-assessment, self-evaluation. And the last skill, bottom left, that I put is, of course, communicative skills. It's not sufficient just to take the input, but we also need them to be able to express themselves both in writing and speaking so that they can deliver the message that they want to deliver. That can be in any language, but as English teachers, of course, we can focus on improving and developing their oral skills and their writing skills by using global citizenship topics as the context or the content. As English teachers, we primarily focus on vocabulary, grammar, functional skills, and the 4 skills of reading, writing, listening, speaking. But we do need a content or context for that. So why don't we use some of these themes like stereotypes and bias and looking at intercultural understanding as that content? And from that, we can then exploit or extract the vocabulary or the grammar that meets our regular English curriculum goals. So on the screen, I've put a sort of checklist that I think you might find useful when it comes to planning an activity or a lesson. And it incorporates then knowledge, attitudes, action, and skills. I'll just give you a moment to read through the points. I can see now, I think that the chat box is working, so that's great. So if you want to communicate with me, send a question or a comment, please do. I'll try and keep my eyes on that, but my colleagues will also share with me any comments that I miss at the end. So the first point I put here then, this really relates to the knowledge area. When we're dealing with a topic, how will I present this information? So what kind of input will I be giving the students? Will it be explicitly saying, right, today we're going to look at this particular topic of stereotypes, so they are aware of it, explicit teaching, or am I going to be kind of sneaking it in, indirectly bringing in a global citizenship theme, which they may not be aware of, but which emerges or comes out of the text or the listening that I'm doing, or even from perhaps a grammar presentation? I might be sprinkling global citizenship over it, but I'm not directly focusing on it. Both are effective ways to present the information. So the second point then is, well, what will this look like, this input? Will it be a reading text, a listening text, or a video perhaps that I have found online? Or will I, the teacher, be presenting and giving information, giving a situation, giving a story myself? Or will I ask the students to do some investigation, perhaps some internet research on a particular topic, so they get to discover the content or the message for themselves? Ideally, we'll have a variety of these. We'll use different ways of presenting the input, just as we would with any topic in the English classroom. Students are going to need language support if the input is in English. And obviously in the English lesson, it's likely to be almost 100% in English. So I need to think of anything I need to pre-teach in terms of vocabulary or grammar. Will they need support in terms of perhaps layout? They may be unfamiliar with how to access information on a website. So I might take them through how to do that. This brings us into the area of skills as well. If they're going to be reading something, do they have the skills to be able to read for the big picture, for gist, read for detail, skim through to get the main idea, or scan for detail? Likewise, listening for detail. Or it might be a skill like, can they actually access a website? Do they know how to click through? Do they know how to access multimedia? Are they good at jumping around from page to page without getting lost? And again, it depends on the age of your students. But you'll see that these types of skills are something that we have to cover anyway in our English language curriculum. So why not do this with the global citizenship theme behind? The input is fine, but our students need to do something with that input. They need to produce something. There has to be output. So what will my students do once they have knowledge of the theme? Are they going to do an oral presentation? Are they going to produce a poster with pictures, cutting up magazines, or perhaps coloring if they are younger students? Will they produce an email, a letter? Will they produce an essay looking at pros and cons, advantages, disadvantages? I need to kind of think of where this knowledge is going to be. And if I want them to express their attitude, is that going to be in a pair work, group work? Is it going to be in a discussion or a debate? Or will it be perhaps a more formal oral presentation with slides? So again, a familiar thing that we have to consider when it comes to lesson planning, but it's useful to have on our checklist. And as teachers, assessment we know is important. So what am I going to assess in terms of their knowledge, and how am I going to assess that? Will I be assessing it informally, or will I be giving them marks on their content? So hopefully a useful checklist for you as you approach one of the global citizenship themes or topics. So the topic of changemaker is what I chose today, and by changemaker I'm thinking here of a global citizen, an individual who has made a positive difference to their community. And I see this as a useful topic, particularly if we choose somebody who is of a similar age to our students, or perhaps somebody who is a little bit older, but our students are familiar with. And this might then inspire them to do something similar, take similar action, or these kind of role models might encourage students to look at what they can do in their lives to change and perhaps improve their environment. You might be familiar with the lady on the left, the celebrity hero. In the chat box, can anybody tell me who that lady is standing behind the lectern wearing a black top? Who is she? Do you recognize her? Give you a clue, she's an actress. She's a Harry Potter actress, so students might be familiar with her. You might be shouting at the screen here. It's Emma Watson, the British actress, and she is one of the ambassadors for the UN. And in a Macmillan Education book, you can see on the screen, Upskill 2, we've got a little text about her and the campaigns that she believes in. But of course, it doesn't have to be about celebrities, and you might think that celebrities are a bit far away from the reality of our students. So we can just choose individuals, ordinary individuals, but who are actually special in their own way. So you can see in the middle, this is a model who, despite her disability, walks on as a catwalk model, has overcome her disability, and indeed actively campaigns for the rights of disabled people. Again, in Upskill 2, we have a little text about her. There's also a text about a lady called Mary Grace, and she has been working hard in the education sector to give people with less opportunities for education, opportunities to improve their access to education. And the lady on the right, her name is Marley Diaz. She's been campaigning to have a higher profile of Black Americans in books. She noticed that less than 10% of books published in America had a Black character as the central character. So she wanted to do something about that. And writing to publishers, campaigning for this, she's been promoting the idea that there should be diversity within books and literature. So again, any individual who's made a positive difference, and I'm sure you can find individuals from Italy that would be a useful role model that would inspire your students. Another example I wanted to share with you was this lady, Patricia Manube. You can see her in the middle. The thing that she is famous for, she was a teenager. She set up something called a dream box. Now, any idea what this dream box is? I've taken some photos and images from a short video that you can, if you go onto Google, you'll find on a CNN website, or if you put in the internet search Patricia Manube, you'll find a little video about what she did at school, and it's called Dreambox. So looking at the pictures in the chat box, can you predict or guess what is a Dreambox? What's inside it? What does Patricia try and do? Just give you a few moments to see if you can predict and put your answer in the chat box, please. What do you think is a dream box? So hopefully you can see it in the top left. Here the box is open, and inside it there is stationery. So notebook, pens, pencils. She's trying to provide basic education supplies for communities, both in the United States and in her home country, the Philippines, where some students might not have much in the way of stationery. And yes, I can see in the chat box, somebody has put writing wishes. Okay, so this is the extra part. I mean, it's nice to get stationery supplies, pens, paper, notebook. That's very useful. But the extra bit that I think is a really important, nice touch is that she gets people to write messages of encouragement to the student. So an individual student writing to another student, encouraging them to follow their dreams, to take part in studying and learning. And you'll see there's this dream diary. Each of the boxes has a little diary with messages in it written by other students to encourage and inspire, telling them to follow their dream, to write down their goals, and then each week, each month, to reflect on that and see how they're going with their learning journey. And it's a nice touch, isn't it? Having one student speaking to another student in another part of the world who they'll never get to meet face to face, but who's taken the time and the effort to write encouraging words. On the right, you can see an example of this. It could be a little postcard that someone writes. It could be an essay. It could be a poster. This box contains a sort of small poster that says, "Education is the most powerful weapon for changing the world." And that's gone into the box just to encourage the person who receives the box. And she gathered together her friends at high school. They contacted local organizations to provide the pens, paper, notebooks, and then her friends took the time to write these messages. And the boxes then get packed and sent to different communities, both within America and within the Philippines. So this might be something, it's nothing too complicated. It does require time and effort, but it's action that Patricia took that might be something that would inspire or encourage your students to do something similar. So as I say, if you go onto your internet search engine, if you put in Patricia Manube or you put in Dreambox, you'll find a nice little video that you can show your students so they get listening practice. They could summarize it. They could answer comprehension questions. So you're integrating the regular English language activities and sprinkling it with a global citizenship theme. In the Macmillan Education materials for Upskill 2, we take this idea of Patricia as a role model, and in the workbook then we have a little activity where we use Patricia and her dream box and her story to help us develop writing skills. You can see it's just one small exercise focusing on writing, but we could follow it up with a little discussion. What do our students think about Patricia? Have they heard of anything similar? Do they think it's a good idea? So you can jump from the writing activity, which you can see focuses on connecting words, but, because, and so. You can jump from that into a little speaking activity where they get to express their own opinion about this and perhaps to consider something that they could do. So just looking at the text, can you do the writing part? Where would you put but? Where would you put because? Where would you put so? Just give you a moment to think about that. So I guess the writing, the grammar parts, students would need to produce because Patricia Manube believed education was very important. She wanted to help children from poor families. We might have to have another connector, so poor families, but they didn't always have books, pens, but they didn't always have books, pens for school. So she set up the organization Dream Boxes. So that would be the grammar, the writing part, but then explore with students what they think about Patricia's charitable campaign. So hopefully that example shows you in real, practical, concrete terms how we use this framework and how we integrate global citizenship with the English syllabus. So going back to the framework about knowledge, attitudes, action, and skills, let's just check what have our students got in terms of knowledge about Patricia. Is there an opportunity in those activities for a focus on attitudes? What about a focus on action? And what would be the skills that students would develop and practice using that material? So the pictures, perhaps looking at the video, going through the writing activity. Are we covering knowledge, attitudes, action, and skills? In the chat box, do you want to perhaps choose one of those, knowledge, attitudes, action, or skills, and tell me what we covered? What did our students learn from that short activity, that short bits of information? So if we look at knowledge at the top, so students have got to know about one global citizen, one change maker. They've also got to know about the Dreambox organization, and perhaps they've got to know about the importance of encouraging people to continue their education studies. And they might also then know now that in some communities, in some countries, a lack of basic supplies like pens, paper, notebook, can prevent students from furthering and continuing their education. And therefore, they might know that within their own society, within their own community, perhaps how fortunate they are that they might have easier access to education supplies. They might have easier access to education than other people. So perhaps just acknowledging some of the good fortune that they have. And perhaps knowing then that other people aren't quite as fortunate, but there are things that we can do to support other communities. In terms of attitudes, after the writing activity, you can get students to express their attitude. What do they think about Patricia? What do they think about that campaign? When they're watching the video, they'll be listening to Patricia give the reasons why she set up the campaign, what she feels is important in terms of education for everybody, equity for all. So you get to explore that through both listening practice and also a speaking activity. In terms of action, they get to see modeled what Patricia has done. So they can see an example of a teenager at school who's taking action, and therefore they might take it upon themselves to do something similar within their own community, or it might just be setting a little seed in their heads, which later on, when they're older, they might reflect on and decide to do something that's similar in terms of education for all or equity for all. So again, we're just laying the groundwork, setting the foundations for students who, as they get older, might want to take more direct action or just think about these things at the stage they are at now, but preparing them to be change makers in the future. And the skills that they'll be covering, well, the video will give listening skills, talking to their friends, so they'll have communication skills going on there, critical thinking skills, analyzing what Patricia's doing, whether they think it's right or appropriate or realistic. If you get them working in pairs and groups together, then there'll be collaborative skills going on. There may be some creativity, some innovation. If they don't think that a dream box is appropriate in their community, is there something else that they could do that would improve equality or equity within their school, community, or town? So that would be a skill of requiring creativity and innovation. So just a couple of basic activities that hopefully tick off the English language syllabus, language and skills that they need, but also introduce students to knowledge, attitudes, and action from a global citizenship framework as well. Now, I said at the beginning that some people have concerns about global citizenship. They might feel that it's not easy to implement or it's not appropriate. And working with teachers all over the world, the comments that they often make, I've put on the screen. So just have a look at the comments that you can see around this wall. I put a wall because it's a kind of, it can be a blockage. It can block teachers from taking the step of implementing global citizenship in the classroom. So hopefully we can break down this challenges wall by coming up with some practical solutions. Let's have a look at the first comment. So starting at the top left. I often hear this from English teachers. So I'm an English teacher. Global citizenship is not my responsibility. That's for somebody else. Give you a moment to think about that comment. It might be a comment that you share, or it might be a comment that you're surprised about. In the chat box, how would you respond to this person if this was a colleague of yours? So they feel that they are only there to teach English. Global citizenship is not part of their curriculum. Ideas, suggestions in the chat box, please. I can see we've got an I do not agree. Okay, so what would you say to the individual? What comment would you make? Why is it perhaps our responsibility, or why could it be our responsibility? I guess my first comment would be that global citizenship really is everybody's responsibility, both student and teacher, both school administrators, both families. Everybody is a part of the world. And as I said at the beginning, our actions, our attitudes have consequences. So whether we like it or not, we are interlinked with everybody. Now I can see in the chat box, we teach a language, and that includes expressing opinions. Thank you. That's right. So why not use global citizenship as the content or the theme? And that would be the second part of my reply to this individual, that as an English teacher, you need content, you need a reading text, you need a video for your students to listen to. It could be something that's fairly basic, but it could be something that's more challenging, which has the global citizenship theme. And this might interest and inspire and motivate your students. If they're reading a text that they find boring because it's talking about perhaps just a regular celebrity, the day in the life of an actor, they may have no interest in that person. But if you deal with perhaps stereotypes, or looking at bias, or looking at where their food comes from, or even human rights, that might be something that actually generates their interest, activates them, and therefore allows you to get their attention and focus on the English vocabulary, grammar, or skills that form part of your English curriculum. So for me, global citizenship is not something extra, it's not something added, it's something that I can use or sprinkle over my regular English language topics. Now, at the very top, here's a comment. Some global citizenship topics are too controversial. We can probably all think of those, perhaps political topics. They might be social topics regarding gender. They might be issues that are sensitive within your country, your community. So therefore, you might feel, oh, I'm not going to touch those. They're inappropriate, perhaps for the age group of my students. So therefore, I'm not going to touch any global citizenship. What would be your response to your colleague who says that? Is it true that some topics are too controversial? Is it true, therefore, that you should do no global citizenship? Ideas in the chat box, please. Thank you. So I can see somebody's put, it can be useful for a class debate. Okay, so something that's controversial should hopefully spark interest, and you can look at both sides of the argument. And that's usually a part of the secondary level English curriculum, isn't it? Debates and discussions, writing opinion essays, looking at pros and cons in writing paragraphs. So perhaps it gives you the perfect topic for those types of exercises or tasks. And again, my simple answer would be, if the topic is too controversial, you're the teacher, you know best, you know what's appropriate, well, don't teach that topic. Find another topic. I gave you a whole list of possible themes and topics at the beginning of this webinar. Surely one or two of those would still be appropriate. So don't throw out global citizenship because you're nervous about one or two specific topics that might be highly controversial. Focus on the others. Perhaps when the students get older, you could go back to some of those topics that are more appropriate for teenagers, or perhaps it's something that they'd come across at high school. The comment here, global citizenship will not be in the exams. I guess that's probably true at the moment, that the readings or the writing tasks will not specifically focus on global citizenship. I think my comment in that one would be, they may not be in the exams, but lots of things we do in the class are not in the exam, but the kind of exam skills that they will need in terms of being able to brainstorm, explore a topic, analyze a topic, come up with ideas, opinions, all those things we will explore with them in the classroom, and we can equally well explore using the global citizenship topic. So just because the specific theme doesn't appear in the exam, the idea of attitudes, taking action, all those skills of questioning, collaborating, they're still useful. And I'd hope as teachers that we don't just teach to the exam. Thank you for the comment in the box. It says they are in our lives. Yeah, so what we do in the classroom isn't just for the exam, is it? I would hope. It's preparing our students for their higher education, for jobs, for the community, the world around them, for the whole of their life. It's a lifelong learning process, and I think global citizenship is there at every stage. The next comment, my students are too young to take action in particular. Well, I think this goes back to the concept of what I mean by action. Yes, they might be too young to be marching in the streets with posters and placards about climate change. But again, you don't have to do that. You can just perhaps model some action in the classroom. Perhaps they can just create a poster with pictures and colouring about climate change, about protecting animals, about having respect for rivers, wildlife, switching off the taps at home, turning off the electricity. You can be exploring that with them through posters, collages, little discussions, which might filter into them so that when they go home, they might be able to spread that message to their family and their friends. So there's a whole variety of action that can take place, and it doesn't just have to be direct action outside the classroom. The final concern we have, there's no time in my lessons for global citizenship. I know English teachers are really busy, you have a lot to cover, you've got all your regular syllabus. Why do I have to have yet one more thing? But I hope, as you'll have seen during my webinar, I don't see global citizenship as one more thing, one additional thing. It's purely something to integrate and to use at times to sprinkle over your lessons. Therefore, I would argue, you don't need to find extra time for it. It might just naturally integrate it within the workbook, the student book activities, those examples I gave you from Upskill. And if there is time required, it might just be 1 or 2 minutes for a little bit of reflection after they've done a reading or a listening, where you look at the topic from a global citizenship perspective or angle. So I hope that deals with some of the concerns and provides some practical solutions, either for yourself or that you can share with colleagues, because it'd be great if you can take the ideas from this webinar and perhaps spread them to the rest of your colleagues. Not only English teachers, but global citizenship can be integrated, I would argue, within any subject. One thing I wanted to share with you, Macmillan Education, if you go onto their website, you will find a section called Advancing Futures. There's lots of information, lots of examples here, and one section focuses on change makers. There is a way for teachers to upload and share, therefore, with the Macmillan community and therefore the world, examples of global citizenship tasks, activities, projects that they have carried out in their own schools. So if you go to macmillaneducation.com and you search for Advancing Futures, you'll find the Change Makers webpage. On there, we've got examples from China, from Spain. It would be great to get some examples from Italy going up. Some teachers have put lesson plans, or they've put pictures and photos and images of what their students are doing in terms of community projects, environmental projects, in terms of global citizenship topics. Hopefully these will inspire you and give you ideas, but also give you an opportunity to be a part of the Macmillan Education Advancing Futures website. Their slogan is share a part and be a part. And I think the idea is great that we can see what other people are doing, other teachers just like us, and we can also demonstrate and show what we ourselves are doing in our own classrooms. So I do warmly encourage you to go to the Macmillan Education website and have a look at the change makers. There's a nice little 2-minute video with children talking that you could show in your own classroom, and that might inspire the next generation of change makers, namely our students. So that kind of brings me pretty much to the end of this webinar. Any questions or comments that people would like to make? I'm happy to try and answer them.
Thanks, Jonathan. That was really interesting. So if you have any questions about how to implement this in your classroom, we've got a couple minutes left. So use that chat box. All right. Don't want to force people to speak either.
We've got a nice comment that's inspiring, so thank you very much. That's a very kind
I saw
comment.
that. Very good. Yeah, useful for a class debate. Also, that's another one. These are certainly issues that would, get people speaking.
Yeah, and often these topics do generate lots of ideas and opinions from the students. They might get excited and want to do it in Italian. Well, perhaps it's okay for them to just, express what they want in Italian and then come back to it and get them to rethink and see how they could do it in English.
Yeah.
And younger students in particular who may not have enough English to express it, well, give them a chance to, express what they want to say first, and then help them with the language that they need to be able to do the same in speaking and writing in English. It's not specific necessarily to the English classroom. It can be covered in any other classroom as well. So if you're a primary teacher and you cover more than one subject area, it might be something that you can bring in both in their mother tongue and then address later in English.
All right. Well, I think that probably will do it, Jonathan.
Fine.
You might have answered every question that our teachers had during the discussion. And in any case, these slides should be made available to the participants as well, so they'll be able to take them, and use them as they're preparing for the lesson. So anyway, thanks to everyone for being with us this afternoon, and we'll see you the next time. Thanks. Bye, Jonathan. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.